Welcome back, everyone. Pal Ponder on Weather here. We've got some big changes happening in the week ahead that'll actually filter in to next week. So let's take a look at the Northern Hemisphere view setup this morning. We've actually got a kind of a colder look. If this was actually February, this is what you would typically see if you like cold Arctic outbreaks and snow out there, because we have a high latitude blocking well to the north as the AO and the NAO are actually both turning negative. This typically releases cold Arctic air if this is actually the winter time, but it is August, folks. And so in August, it's that cooler air is only going to push that far south. And we do have some cooler air to talk about. And let's take a look at the setup, because actually even beyond that, we're starting to see the first signs of the transition to fall, folks. So we've got a colder pool that's actually going to be building up there in Siberia around the middle of August. That's typically what you'd like to see if you're starting to kind of make that transition. So we are in the heart of summer. This is going into August 1st tomorrow. So yeah, any signs of relief is on the way, and we do see some of that as we slowly will be starting to make the transition towards fall into the September timeframe. But for now, we've got some cooler conditions to talk about, especially to the north. So with that AO negative as well as the NAO negative, with that high latitude blocking, that's releasing some of that cooler upper level energy and filtering in into at least the northeastern parts of the US. So for the high temperatures today, wow, folks, this is really pleasant across the Ohio Valley into the mid-Atlantic regions, especially as you start heading up here to the Northeast into New England. That's 60s showing up on the map, folks. That is some very pleasant, comfortable-like air. But you can see where it's not pleasant is the baking high pressure that's locked under the southern plains, where you're seeing numerous widespread triple digits. But we are seeing a tad bit of a cool down across the Southwest. They're actually going to be seeing their first day under 110 in Phoenix in 31 days. So, but for the setup for today, we're not looking at like widespread severe storms like we did last week. I don't think the storms are going to be as intense in the week ahead as they were last week, but nonetheless, they are going to be traversing along that northern periphery of the ridge. So the setup for today, we could be seeing some stronger thunderstorms, complements of this little tropical wave out here along into the Florida and along the East Coast into the Carolinas. There's another little pocket of instability that could impact portions of Missouri, back into portions of Arkansas, as well as into Louisiana. And then we have those thunderstorms down here in this desert Southwest. That's going to be the culprit. I think the low was actually 83 in Phoenix this morning, but that's actually going to be filtering into those areas in the desert Southwest and portions of the Utah region as we get, later on this afternoon. But here's the overall jet stream. So this week, it's just the intense heat further south as the jet stream is well to the north. But if you're on the northern periphery of that jet stream, you're feeling that just nice, comfortable conditions. And I think that actually locks in for the rest of the week and actually going into the following week, especially on the northern periphery of the US. So we'll break down those details, and it's really all complements of the teleconnections. Here's the NAO, which is more or less flatline right now, but you can see the dip, right? We see a pretty substantial dip in the NAO that drags down some of that cooler air aloft and filters it down to the surface. And you're going to be feeling the effects, especially in those areas to the northern periphery of the US and across the Northeast, of that cooler air. And that definitely hangs around a while because the AO is also negative as well. So it continues through the first week of August and actually into the second week of August. So we're definitely seeing some signs of really some comfortable conditions, but we're also seeing signs, if you're on the southern periphery of that, of really intense heat. And that's exactly what you're going to get, because by the time we head into Wednesday, there's the cooler anomalies up there in the Northeast. We're talking 10, possibly 15 degrees below average temperatures, what you would typically see in really the heart of summer, right? We're in basically the hottest part of the summer heading into August tomorrow. For those first couple of weeks in August, that is when you typically get the most intense heat out there. And a lot of them already seen it, and a lot of them get a lot more heat because there's definitely gonna be a lot of heat down here in the southern plains as those triple digits continue really all week long. But we see subtle signs that's trying to build in kind of a troughing feature out here off the west coast. That's going to be pulling some cooler anomalies along with that secondary push of the AO and the negative NAO by the time we head deeper into the week. So here's the setup on Thursday. There's that ridge basically part over North Texas, like a lot of sinking air. I mean, some of those areas could hit 110, folks. Pretty dangerous stuff. Not just that, and it's bone dry in these regions. The winds actually increase. That means the fire dangers increase. And by Wednesday and Thursday, these areas could be looking at extreme fire danger. So this is dangerous stuff, folks. I mean, the soil is very, very dry, especially with those winds start to kick up. It doesn't take much to spark a fire, and those winds would, create the fire and jump with the higher wind gusts. So that's why I feel like they're going to be probably making a decision, but yeah, they're probably going to be extending it, and likely by the time we head into Wednesday, Thursday, under some of those extreme fire danger risk. So heading in deeper into the week, once we transition into Friday, you see that troughing, that kind of that colder pool up here in the Northeast. That's going to still lock over those regions, but it's actually going to be sharing some of that cooler air, obviously modified the further southeast it gets. But nonetheless, by the time we head into Tennessee and getting into portions of Georgia, you're starting to feel at least the subtle effects of that cooler air. While next week, there's going to be a trough coming in, and that's eventually going to be, producing some of those cooler temperatures up in the upper level regions. And that's also going to be filtering down to the surface, and that's going to be bringing some, reinforced cooler anomalies up here into portions of Montana back into Wyoming. And that's exactly what the Climate Prediction Center is already kind of hinting at in the extended range with those cooler push, right? So you have the negative AO and the negative NAO dragging down some of those cooler air, lowers the jet stream just a little bit further. So there's going to be a kind of a sharp gradient in temperatures, right? And then obviously the further south you get, it starts to modify, and it will start to ooze down here into portions of Oklahoma. And I think it actually gets into portions of North Texas heading into next week. So, but the breakdown for the next 5 days, you can obviously see where the sinking air and the heat dome is. There's nothing to speak of in and around that heat dome. There are subtle signs in the southwest, and that will go up and over the ridge back into Utah and to portions of Wyoming here, and that elevates the rain activity, squeezes out that atmosphere into portions of Colorado. And then some of these heavier bandings in rain could kind of get its act together as well into portions of Missouri and at least the central and southern Illinois, back here to Kentucky and into portions of Tennessee here, as well as Florida definitely stays on the wet side, and then the Northeast stays on the wet side as well. So beyond that, heading into Sunday, there's your change, right? That ridge of high pressure just slowly backfills back to the west, right? So it's going to be backing, really predominantly setting up shop across the Four Corners regions. Most of these areas will be back over the 110, 115, possibly even 120 range by then, as that puts the placement of any higher precipitation amounts to the northern periphery of that back into Idaho, back into portions of Montana, getting into Wyoming again, and then of course lighter amounts as you get closer to the ridge. But heading into next week, there's the transition of that cooler anomalies filtering just a tad bit further south. So here's the boundary going into Monday. This would be next Monday, August the 7th time frame, as some of those cooler anomalies try to push and ease in and eat away at some of those of that that high pressure, right? And that will eventually, like I said, hang it back out to the southwest, and you can definitely see it on the 850s next week. So this is some colder air aloft that will filter down to the down to the surface and bring some of those welcome relief. It's definitely not chilly, and it's definitely not, we're just basically talking about taking you out of the triple digits in Oklahoma, back into the Texas panhandle, Maybe parts of North Texas might actually sink close to just almost 100 degrees instead of the 105, 108 type variety. That's kind of the stuff we're talking about. But we are talking about possibly increased rain chances back into these areas. And so these areas that have been really dry for the last 2 weeks and going forward for the next week, we are seeing subtle changes of extending and kind of breaking that overall pattern that you've been kind of locked into for a couple of weeks now, filtering in rain chances back into Oklahoma, back into portions of, you know, the Texas Panhandle, back into portions of North Texas. That filters into Arkansas and northern you know, Mississippi areas, and back into Alabama. And, you know, with that high pressure backing off, right? So that puts all the sinking air, instead of locked over the southern plains, it puts it out to the west, right? Over the Four Corners region. So these areas start to go bone dry again. And then the northern periphery of that, it starts setting up shop on the northwest flow. So with the weakness of the ridge across the southern plains and back out southwest, that would put storm chances a little bit further south, right? So by the time we head into next Monday, maybe next Monday, Tuesday, possibly Wednesday timeframe, you are going to see at least hints of rain opportunities down here into these regions that really hasn't seen much, you know, as of late. But the heavier rain, the most, you know, concentrated rain, would be to the northern periphery of that. So it'd be across portions of Nebraska, getting into, you know, northern portions of Kansas, back into Missouri again. And then you still have that culprit of these tropical waves just kind of hanging off the southeast coast, that highlights these areas with some heavier rainfall, especially further you live, you know, within these coastal regions. But out in the tropics, there's really not much going on, right? We're in an El Nino. Obviously the sea surface temperatures are warm, but we got a lot of shear, a lot of sinking air out there. And obviously right now, the only game in town is this storm that's hanging out in the open waters of the Atlantic. Has about an 80% probability, probably a good chance it actually becomes Emily this week, sometime this week. But there's also a even better chance it's going to hang out to sea and affect nobody. That's what's going on this week. But then next week, you can see where the activity is. Not much organized, but we do have not much precipitation along these main development regions and along these regions that we would typically see, you know, maybe look for tropical development, right? But we have lower than average rainfall. So we got a lot of stuff working against us right now if you're looking for tropical storms, and it's just not happening, at least in the short term. And then of course it fights these higher temperatures, so it's not as intense. It's pretty intense across the south this week. It's still going to be hot, but it's not going to be as intense. That's the best you can hope for heading into next week, because there's the temperature anomalies going into that second week of August, right? So it still has the push. It has the main push of the AO and the negative NAO really taking, you know, feeling the effects, at least in the northern states. But on the southern half of the U.S. is still going to be locked under the ridge, but it's likely not going to be as intense, you know, next week as what you're going to be experiencing this week. And yes, the further south this is going to be able to push, you have the highest precipitation anomalies further north, but it actually lowers as you filter further south into Oklahoma, but still gives you, you know, for this time of year, above average rain probabilities heading into the following week. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video, definitely hit the subscribe button, and catch me next update while I protect you before and after the storm.